deep dive into the German federal election coming up.
Yeah.
This isn't just another election, though. We're facing a real political puzzle here. On February 23rd.
Right.
Germans are headed to the polls, but this snap election, it was called after the current coalition collapsed last November.
Oh, wow.
It has a real twist to it.
Okay.
The far-right AfD party, they're currently polling higher than any other single party.
So what's captivating about this election is it's a paradox at its heart. The AfD's popularity is undeniable.
Right.
But all the other parties, the center-right CDU, current Chancellor Olaf Scholz's SPD, and the Greens have vowed to exclude them from any potential coalition.
It's an unprecedented situation.
Yeah.
Imagine a party potentially winning the most votes.
Yeah.
Yet being completely shut out of power.
Crazy, huh?
How did we get here?
Right.
Let's start with the AfD.
Oh, okay.
What are they all about? And why are they striking a chord with so many voters?
Well, the AfD's platform is built around a return to traditional values and a rejection of what they see as the failures of the current political establishment.
Okay.
They're calling for some pretty drastic measures.
Like what?
Like remigration, which essentially means mass deportation of migrants.
Wow.
A return to the Deutschmark, mandatory military service, and sweeping changes to the education system.
Some pretty radical idea.
These positions are considered extreme by many, but they tap into a vein of discontent among some segments of the population.
So they're appealing to voters who feel like the system isn't working for them.
Exactly.
And who are looking for radical change.
Germany's economy has been facing headwinds.
Yeah.
High energy costs, sluggish growth, and some voters feel like they're being left behind.
Yeah.
Add to that concerns about immigration and cultural change. And you have a recipe for a party like the AfD to gain traction.
But as you mentioned earlier, all the other parties have drawn a line in the sand. They're saying no matter how many votes the AfD gets, we won't work with them.
Exactly.
What are the implications of this cordon sanitaire?
It effectively blocks the AfD from power even if they win the most seats in parliament.
Wow.
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
And it raises interesting questions about the balance between democratic representation and protecting democratic values. Some argue it's necessary to prevent a party with extremist views from influencing government policy.
Right.
Others worry it could further alienate AfD supporters.
Right.
And deepen political divisions.
It's a high-stakes gamble. So if the AfD is off the table, who are the key players we should be watching?
Right.
And what are the most likely coalition scenarios?
Well, the polls point to a coalition government as the most likely outcome. The most likely scenario is a coalition led by the center-right CDU, potentially with Friedrich Merz as chancellor, partnering with either the SPD or the Greens.
Okay, so a potential CDU-led coalition.
Yeah.
But those parties, they have some pretty different views on key issues like the economy, defense spending, and social welfare.
Yeah.
How are they going to bridge those divides?
It won't be easy.
I imagine not.
Take the debt break, for example.
Okay.
This law limits new state borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
The SPD and Greens, particularly the Greens,
yeah,
are pushing to loosen it, to allow for more investment, especially in areas like green technology and social programs.
Okay.
But the CDU, and especially their potential coalition partner, the FDP, are more fiscally conservative and wary of increased government spending.
I see.
These negotiations will likely be quite contentious.
So even without the AfD in the picture, forming a government won't be a walk in the park.
No.
These parties are going to have to find ways to compromise on some pretty fundamental issues.
Absolutely. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of the AfD's rise.
Yeah.
It puts even more pressure on these potential coalition partners to demonstrate that they can govern effectively and address the concerns that are fueling support for the AfD.
So what does this mean for our listener tuning in from outside Germany?
Okay.
What are the potential consequences of this unusual election and the likely coalition government that will emerge?
It's important to remember that Germany plays a significant role on the world stage.
Absolutely.
It's the largest economy in Europe and a key player in the European Union.
Right.
The policies of the next German government on issues like immigration, climate change, and economic reform will have ripple effects far beyond Germany's borders.
All right, so we've set the stage.
Yeah.
A complex political landscape with this specter of the AFD looming large.
Right.
But let's delve a little deeper into the potential coalition scenarios.
Okay.
And their implications.
Yeah. Specifically, how might a potential CDU-led government address the issues that are contributing to the AFD's popularity?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
To understand this, we need to take a closer look at the CDU's platform.
Okay.
And how it compares to those of the SPD and the Greens.
Right.
Where do their priorities align and where do they diverge?
Let's break it down then.
Okay.
Starting with the economy.
Right.
What are the CDU's key proposals and how do they differ from the approaches of the SPD and the Greens?
Well, the CDU is campaigning on a platform of fiscal responsibility and economic growth.
Okay.
They're proposing tax cuts, deregulation,
right,
and investments in infrastructure, particularly digital infrastructure.
Okay.
They argue that this approach will create jobs, boost innovation, and make Germany more competitive globally.
So a classic center-right approach.
Yeah.
How does that contrast with the SPD and the Greens?
Right.
Aren't they typically more focused on social welfare and environmental protection?
That's right.
The SPD, for example, is emphasizing social justice and support for working families.
Right.
They're proposing policies like an increase in the minimum wage, expanded childcare, and affordable housing. They argue that these measures are essential to ensure a fair and equitable society.
And the Greens, I imagine their focus is primarily on climate change and environmental sustainability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Greens are calling for a rapid transition to renewable energy, stricter environmental regulations, and investment in green technologies.
Right.
They see climate change as the defining challenge of our time and believe that bold action is needed to avert a catastrophe.
So we have three parties with distinct economic priorities.
Yeah.
The CDU focused on growth and competitiveness. The SPD on social welfare.
Right.
And the Greens on environmental sustainability.
Exactly.
It seems like finding common ground could be challenging.
It certainly will be.
Yeah.
But coalition governments are all about compromise.
Right.
The key question is, how much are each of these parties willing to give up to form a government?
Right.
And how will those compromises shape Germany's future?
We'll be back in a flash to unpack those compromises and explore the potential implications for Germany and the world.
Sounds good.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay. Let's delve into one particularly contentious issue that highlights these potential compromises. Defense spending.
Okay.
The CDU under Merz has pledged to increase defense spending to meet NATO's target of 2% of GDP.
Right.
This aligns with their vision of a stronger Germany on the world stage.
Okay.
However, both the SPD and the Greens have traditionally been more hesitant about military spending, favoring diplomacy and conflict resolution.
That's a significant difference in outlook.
It is.
How might these contrasting views play out in coalition negotiations?
It's a potential flashpoint.
Yeah.
The SPD and the Greens might be willing to increase defense spending somewhat,
but
they're likely to push for a greater emphasis on multilateralism and non-military solutions to international conflicts. The CDU, on the other hand, sees a stronger military as essential for Germany's security and its ability to project power on the global stage.
So, on issues like defense spending, a CDU-led coalition would likely involve some tough negotiations and potentially some creative compromises.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not just defense spending where we see these potential clashes.
Right.
Immigration is another highly charged issue where the parties have very different perspectives.
Okay.
The CDU has campaigned on a platform of controlled immigration, emphasizing the need to limit the number of asylum seekers and prioritize skilled workers.
This seems to echo the AFD's rhetoric, albeit in a more moderate tone.
It does to some extent.
What are the SPD and the Greens proposing on immigration?
The SPD and the Greens generally favor a more welcoming approach to immigration.
Okay.
They argue that Germany needs immigrants to address its aging population and labor shortages.
Right.
And they emphasize the importance of integration and social cohesion. They see immigration as a source of cultural enrichment and economic dynamism.
So we have a real clash of ideologies here. The CDU advocating for stricter controls, the SPD and Greens emphasizing openness and integration.
Yes, there's a definite contrast there.
How might these conflicting views be reconciled in a coalition government?
It's one of the most difficult questions facing any potential coalition.
Right.
They might try to find a middle ground.
Okay.
A system that balances the need for controlled immigration with a commitment to humanitarian values and the recognition of Germany's economic needs.
Yeah.
But any compromise on this issue is likely to be fiercely debated both within the coalition and in the broader public sphere.
It seems that every issue we examine reveals a potential for conflict within a coalition.
There are definitely challenges ahead.
Are there any areas where these parties might find it easier to agree?
One area where there might be more common ground is education.
Okay.
All three parties recognize the importance of investing in education and skills training to prepare Germany's workforce for the challenges of the future, particularly in light of digitalization and automation.
So, while they might disagree on the details, there's a shared understanding that education is key to Germany's future prosperity.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this shared recognition might provide a foundation for collaboration, even in the midst of disagreements on other issues.
It sounds like forming a stable and effective government in this political climate will require a delicate balancing act.
It will.
It's not just about hammering out policy compromises, but also about managing public expectations and addressing the underlying anxieties that have fueled the AfD's rise.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Wow.
The next German government will have to navigate a complex political landscape marked by deep divisions and a sense of unease among some segments of the population.
Right.
How they respond to these challenges will shape not only Germany's future, but also the broader political landscape of Europe.
Speaking of Europe, let's shift our focus to the international arena.
Okay.
What are the potential implications of this election for Germany's role in the European Union and on the global stage?
Germany is a pivotal player in the EU, both economically and politically.
Right.
The outcome of this election will have significant repercussions for the direction of the EU. A CDU-led government, particularly one with Merz at the helm, might push for a more assertive German role in European affairs, advocating for fiscal discipline, a strong common defense policy, and a more robust stance towards Russia.
So, a more hawkish Germany on the European stage. How might that sit with the SPD and the Greens, who traditionally favor a more cooperative and multilateral approach to international relations?
It's another area where we could see tension within a coalition.
Okay.
The SPD and the Greens are likely to advocate for a more cautious approach to foreign policy, emphasizing diplomacy, dialogue, and multilateral cooperation.
Right.
They might be wary of any moves that could be perceived as German dominance within the EU, or that could escalate tensions with Russia.
This election seems to present a constant tug-of-war between different visions for Germany's future domestically and internationally. But one thing is certain. The stakes are high, and the world is watching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Germany is at a crossroads, and the decisions made by the next government will have far-reaching consequences.
We'll be back in a moment to wrap up our deep dive into the German election, exploring the long-term implications of this unique political moment.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We've explored the potential coalition scenarios and their implications, but let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
This election isn't just about policies and personalities.
Right.
It's about something much bigger.
Yeah.
The future of German democracy itself.
Right.
We have a party, the AfD, that's tapping into real anxieties and frustrations.
Yeah.
Yet it's being systematically excluded from power.
They are.
What are the long-term consequences of this approach?
It's a question that's on the minds of many political observers.
I bet.
The cordon-sanitaire strategy is unprecedented in modern German history.
Right.
And its effectiveness in the long run remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Some argue that it's a necessary evil, a way to protect German democracy from a party with extremist views.
Okay.
But others worried that it could backfire, fueling resentment and pushing AfD supporters further to the fringes.
So it's a gamble with potential risks and rewards.
It is.
Could you elaborate on those potential risks?
Sure.
What could happen if this strategy doesn't effectively marginalize the AfD?
One risk is that the AfD could become even more entrenched in the political landscape.
Okay.
If they continue to be excluded from power despite gaining significant support.
Right.
It could reinforce their narrative of being the voice of the forgotten people ignored by the political establishment.
Yeah.
This could further polarize German society and make it even harder to find common ground on critical issues.
And what about the potential rewards?
Right.
If this strategy does succeed in marginalizing the AfD, what does that mean for German politics?
If the cordon sanitaire works as intended, it could send a strong message that extremist views are unacceptable in mainstream German politics. It could also force the AfD to moderate its positions to become more palatable to potential coalition partners,
Right.
leading to a more centrist political landscape.
So there are many unknowns.
There are.
But regardless of how this strategy plays out,
Yeah.
one thing is clear.
What's that?
Mainstream German parties need to address the concerns that are fueling the AfD's rise.
Right.
Ignoring those concerns or dismissing them as simply extremist rhetoric won't make them disappear.
I completely agree.
This election has brought to the forefront some deep-seated societal issues,
It has.
economic anxieties,
Mm-hmm.
cultural shifts,
Yeah.
a sense of loss of control.
Right.
These issues aren't unique to Germany.
No, they're not.
They're playing out in many democracies around the world.
Yeah, all over.
And how Germany grapples with these challenges will be closely watched, both in Europe and beyond.
And absolutely.
So what can our listeners take away from this deep dive into the German election?
Okay.
What's the key insight they should carry with them?
I think the main takeaway is that democracy is a dynamic process,
Right.
constantly evolving and adapting to new challenges.
Yeah,
The German election is a prime example of this.
it is.
We're seeing a country grappling with complex questions about representation, inclusion,
Right.
and the boundaries of acceptable political discourse.
Yeah.
And the answers won't be easy or straightforward.
It's a reminder that democracy requires constant vigilance,
It does.
open dialogue,
Yeah.
and a willingness to confront difficult issues head-on.
Right.
It's not a spectator sport.
No.
It demands active participation from all of us.
Exactly.
And as we watch this German election unfold,
Yeah.
we'll be witnessing not just a political contest,
Right.
but a broader debate about the values and principles that will shape the future of democracy itself.
I think that's a great point.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the German election.
It was my pleasure.
It's been an enlightening journey through a complex and evolving political landscape.
It really has.
We encourage you to stay engaged,
Yeah.
stay informed,
Yeah.
and keep asking those critical questions,
Keep learning.
because the future of democracy depends on all of us.
Absolutely.